Okay, so if you are listening to this and you know me, you are either my parents, in which case, hi, mom or dad, or you are investigating the incident, in which case, I would like to enter my plea of not guilty. Now
We
on,
totally did it.
now on to Webb and Oris, who had the plan for this.
I actually did do it. It's all my fault. So,
I know it.
yeah, guilty. Alright, so, we've been doing this crazy playing D&D and putting it on YouTube thing for, what, like 3 months now?
Seriously, fuck.
We're up to something like 30 videos, 10 episodes.
Wow.
Last I checked this morning, about 23 or 22 subscribers. We're kind of going along at a pretty good clip, so I figured now would be a good time, and because we're losing Auto next week, now would be a good time to slow down for a
Just a
second
little
and
late,
take a look
maybe.
at the world that we've built, that we're actually going to start exploring in the coming weeks, once the whole Bridleford arc. This bit right here says Bridleford. You can't read it correctly because it's long out of date. But
Just
eventually,
if I sound a little weird at all today, it's because I'm also multitasking with eating schnitzel.
eating schnitzel. I don't think I've ever had schnitzel.
Yes, Otto is eating a man.
Oh, you know.
No. I ain't chicken schnitzel.
Yes, that's what they
I
call
don't
it.
eat it until I go to Japan.
Mhm.
And then there was silence.
So, pretending like we know how to stay on task.
Eden.
So, Paul, this is basically your baby for the last year and a half. How did this start?
I'm pretty sure it began when my last campaign, I was in a game with two other people who were in the other group, and we were all playing a game with someone we met on Finfic, and she had some health issues and stuff, so eventually the campaign just sort of died. Although it lingered on long enough, I was like, "Hey guys, I'll run a session for like a game, a week or two."
What happened was,
Isn't that how it always starts?
Now, Otto,
I can I? Oh, fine.
my story.
Except not completely.
And
You can
then
interject your part of the story later.
Fox said he knew some other guys, and they seemed pretty cool, except that Otto guy was a total dick. Um, and eventually we ended up running a long-term game that's been going on for a year and a half, which is about a year and a half longer than every other game I've run up to this point.
Best campaign.
Yeah, well, I had a Rogue Trader when it went like 6 months once. That's about it.
Eh.
Anyways, the idea for the campaign world itself basically came at the start where I was being just a little bit passive aggressive about having to be GM, and I figured I'm gonna throw
that's
stuff
unusual.
into this until I get told in no uncertain terms that I can't GM anymore.
Because that
And
was
boy,
A
did
year and a
that
half later,
backfire.
we're still loving it.
So, I basically started with generic fantasy world, added ponies, then went really crazy, like, okay, so let's throw in all the weird tropes we can.
And
Until
then
somebody
let's
tells me to
take all
stop.
of the usual tropes, throw them out the window, and start fresh. Which is how we got Japanese dwarves.
Yeah.
Oh, and orcs that are actually not barbarians. And well,
Yes, pseudo
kobolds sound like they're Jedi, but they're not.
Roman, or actually I guess they're more like pseudo Greek dwarves.
You're in orcs.
Orcs.
Or yeah, orcs, whatever.
Let's start with the timeline that we came up with. The dawn of time, the dawn of ponies in Eden.
Yeah, so all the ponies showed up in this stereotypical sci-fi or stereotypical fantasy world, and they got there via a very simple way. They
Pern.
crashed their colony ship into it.
Their space colony ship.
Yeah. So the orcs, who were at the time were the big dog of the setting, you know, having enslaved the humans, the dwarves, fought a war with the Viking halflings, and fought like about 3 or 4 wars with the elves. They weren't terribly fond of, you know, a bunch of newcomers crashing into one of their provinces, deciding they didn't like all these slavers around, and you know, starting shit. So they gathered together all their armies and decided to totally crush these newcomers.
Because
You can
that
imagine
happened
about how
with
well
lasers.
that worked. Yeah.
Yeah. Lasers, power armor, robots.
Eventually, after the ponies just completely fractured the Orcish Empire and kicked off a couple dozen slave rebellions, the elves looked over at this, decided they weren't really fond of this whole thing, and one of them cast a spell to disable most of the pony high-tech over the next decade or 4.
Because elves are dicks like that.
Yeah. That is a core conceit of
Mhm.
this setting, that most elves in positions of authority are dicks.
Hey, to be
Especially
fair,
ale.
that's the cool thing of most settings. They just don't get it. Elves are basically uniform dicks, especially in Eberron.
I have never played in Eberron, so
Nope.
One of the nations is the biggest bunch of Mongol-based elvish dicks you'll ever find ever.
All right.
well, my elves are at least
Our
one of
elves are
them
more
is Finnish
Polish.
based. Yeah, one of them is definitely Finnish based.
Mm-hmm. Well, the entire language is like bastardized Finnish anyway.
Yeah, pretty much.
And by bastardized, I do mean Google translated.
So
Actually,
crypt shamelessly.
Yes.
Yeah. So, anyways, the ponies ended up setting up a sort of, you know, republic with joined together with some human slaves they rescued, and that went on for about 30 years or so. Then a group of human and pony nobles kind of, you know, went full retard, started a rebellion, and tried to seize power. So the
Ruin
former
the evils of democracy.
yeah, the evil against the evils of democracy. The former captain of the colony ship ended up fighting off them in the War of the Spider over about 2 years, and then her forces kind of, you know, forcibly elected her empress.
And thus we came upon Empress Dawn the First, the beginning
A pretty
of
cool lady by all accounts.
generally, yeah, who was the first of her line and the beginning ruler of the Equitine Empire.
She spent the next few years generally annexing most of her neighbors and beating up the orcs, and got a pretty cool magic axe out of it, which will play a prominent role later in the game.
Okay,
It's one bitchin'
cutting
ass.
ahead a few hundred years, I actually have the current version of the West Nile map, the map of Eden. So currently we have the Equitine Empire stretches from this line up here, which is our northern border between the Empire and the Confederation of the Nine Forests, which is all of the Elven lands. And we connect, and we stretch all the way down here, out to Brendanford, Meadow by the Sea, which you've already seen. This giant mountain range in the middle is the remnant of the Dwarven shogunates. And then we go all the way down here, down to this border, which we've never actually drawn out, with all of the human kingdoms down in the south, and then back up to around this line, this line of very large squares, which is our western border with the orcs. And then we kind of go all the way back up here, up to the north, and then here's our other northern border. All the way around this great inland sea.
It's very great.
It
You
is.
should visit.
It's pretty cool.
You'll just love
And
it.
right here, this little itty bitty island right here is Arya's hometown. Well, home island. But we'll get to that later.
So, anyways, about I think it's 70 or so years into the Empress's reign, a certain character some of you may be familiar with, known as Nightmare Moon, arises on Eden via shady plot-related magic none of us have ever really looked into for
You've
obvious
got the
reasons.
best-
We
I don't
call
know.
her the Nightmare to avoid copyright.
You've got the theft of the sun and moon.
I was going to get to that.
Oh, okay.
Also, close replicas of most of the other important figures of the show arose via faith-based shenanigans, including copies of the two head princesses who ended up absorbing the elf sun deity and moon deity, which was one of several reasons why elves tend not to like ponies.
Along
Which
with
was
those being
totally
the-
not, getting them back for shutting down the pony high tech or anything. Totally.
No, definitely
No,
not.
I don't know.
Actually, that might be I might have to think about that, yeah.
You're welcome.
A dick move, yeah. Half the setting I have stolen from what you guys have said.
That's entirely true.
Half the point you stolen Neil speculating on what your plot will be.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yep, that's
The
basically exactly
the
what it
only
was.
reason we have the Nightmare as a villain, anyways, is because Neil was like, "Speaker in dreams? That must be."
Yep. Yeah, that's
Yes.
how that started.
It was originally. I mean, I don't know if any of you have ever
same with
played
the gibbering
module
mouther and
Speaker in
Discord.
Dreams, but the antagonist in it is originally a mind flayer.
But Paul banned psionics, so
Yeah.
I
Well,
banned. I banned
Not
player
He also banned speech.
psionics. There's a difference.
yeah.
As you can tell, Otto's fetish is psionics, that filthy bastard.
I just like it. I
Let
don't
him know
get it.
what a pervert he is in the comments.
Yeah,
Sexy,
the first comment
sexy
we'll get will not be
migraines.
about that.
My only disappointment with that is that means that no one can take the Mindbender class,
That is not a disappointment.
which is otherwise
Yeah.
known as Leadership, the class.
Yeah, you're the only person who likes leadership here. No one else does. Leadership just
Good.
makes things sexy. You just have to manage them and deal with them. And,
Yes, well, I've demonstrated. Well, if I haven't demonstrated, I'm going to at least announce now. I have a a mild case of OCD, but it's more CDO, in its correct alphabetical order.
well, bully for you.
That's all, folks. All-
Yeah, so the nightmare arose. Paul?
Yeah, what
Paul died. No, that you were saying the nightmare arose.
Oh yeah. Nightmare arose. There was this big long war called the Twilight War. Lasted about 2-3 years. There's a bit of fighting, and then at the big final climactic battle, the Nightmare is banished for several hundred years at the cost of the Empress's life using a powerful magical artifact. The Empress ends up dying a few weeks after the battle thanks to an evil curse she was hit with. Her daughter takes the throne, and things go on as normal for the next 100 or so years. 130 years. There's a bit more intrigue then, and then stuff goes on for another 500 years, which is when we get to the modern day. At this point, we've developed gunpowder, we've got flying airships, all sorts of stuff. The orcs have been driven onto a large jungle peninsula. The Empire is at its height, all sorts of stuff.